Greetings, everyone. I'm Muqtadar Khan. I'm a professor at the University of Delaware. I teach in the Department of Political Science and International Relations, and I'm also the academic director of State Department's National Security Institute. Today, I'm here talking with Rohit Karki, who is from Nepal. He teaches international relations at Katmandua School of Law. Welcome to the United States, Mr. Rohit Karki.
Thank you for inviting. The first kind of diplomatic relation with Nepal started, I think, post 1950, when the United States shown keen interest to Nepal, especially with the rise of communism in China. So, in the initial period, during the Cold War period, it was particularly more focused on containment of China. So that's how the relation grew between between United States and Nepal. So it primarily focused on more on aid and development issues, but gradually it moved to the more kind of broadly on the human rights issue, like human rights protection issue, and lastly more on kind of democratic promotion area in Nepal by building the democratic institution in Nepal. So that's how the relation has evolved from 1950s to till now. Election of the Donald Trump and he becoming a president was very surprise for most of the Nepalese citizens as well as to the whole world. So it was a bit surprise for our kind of Nepalese kind of both policymaker and also the Nepali citizen in general. They were surprised by the fact that the people like American people have elected this sort of people, the Donald Trump as a president, and it had kind of there is a fear among the Nepali people that the immigrants, like because Nepal people do immigrate to the United States at a large number, so they might see the cutoff of those numbers, especially the diversity visa that the American government issues to the so most of the Nepalis do take a lot of diversity visa. So the first direct impact will be there, like they will think that the diversity visa will stop. Beside that, there is a lot of cutoff of the aid, like the President Donald Trump recently issue an executive order where he is banning some kind of aid related to the abortion sort of things, and also to the related to the female reproductive health issues. So that will have a direct impact to a lot of the aid program that has been delivered in Nepal in terms of protection of human rights.
So talking about the migration from Nepal to the US, do you have any idea on an average how many visas does Nepal get on the diversity?
Well, I can't.
It's basically a lottery, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lottery thing. So roughly, there is a figure around roughly 8 to 10,000 per year that the Nepal gets. But
per year?
Yeah, per year. But the quota is not that fixed, but they get roughly those kind of numbers. So, but there are a lot of students who also comes to study in United States.
For a small country like Nepal, 10,000 per year is pretty large.
I don't know, but there is an interest in Nepal in terms of taking, the way United States has taken a lot of refugees, the Buddhist refugee from Nepal as well. They have keen interest on taking Tibetan refugee from Nepal as well. And beside that, they have been kind of more kind of I don't know, but there is a positive indication towards the Nepalese citizens.
Are there also lots of remittances from the US to Nepal in terms of like hard currency dollars?
We do not have exact figure, but yes, like they do send, like there are a lot of Nepali residents living in the United States who sends a lot of money to the
so there are very close connections for Nepal, so that is interesting.
First of all, let me start with the internal security challenge that Nepal faces. As we must be aware that Nepal is going through a whole transition period. We recently promulgated our new constitution in 2015. So we are supposed to go to more kind of federal restructuring model. So there is a demand of a lot of ethnic groups that they want the federal state to be more kind of ethnic kind of dimension. So there is a fear within the Nepal kind of policymaker, and especially in the security areas, that it might lead to more kind of ethnic kind of disintegration. Maybe ethnic kind of conflict might emerge in Nepal, and which might lead to the disintegration of Nepal territory. And there are a lot of geopolitical interest from both India and China to protect their minority. So we have certain minority Indian community living in a border area of Nepal. So there's keen interest from India how this transition goes on Nepal. So they want to protect their interest both at the citizen level, but also at their ensuring their border are protected well between India and Nepal. China has also shown keen interest on Nepal's kind of federalism in terms of how it will impact on Tibet autonomous region. So we share a border with the Tibet autonomous region also. So there's a keen interest by both India and China, but I think it's more kind of our weak kind of institutional framework, both democratically elected institutions and democratically created institutions that are very much weak. So I don't know, but the future for Nepal looks bleak in terms of internal security challenges, and that has been further compounded by the external security challenge that is being presented by in terms of competition between India and China in Nepal.
So you have threats from the possibility of a state emerging which could fragment along ethnic lines.
Yeah, likely.
But you're also feeling pressure that you might become a battleground for a struggle between India and China. But are there any other regional threats? There's lots of discussions in the media that perhaps Nepal is also a kind of a highway for jihadis traveling to India from the Central Asia and Pakistan. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure, definitely. One of the particular reason why India is keenly interested in Nepal is to make sure, because we share a long porous border with India and the border is open, so anybody can easily cross the Nepal-India border. So there are in the past, like the Islamic terrorist or Islamic jihadist has used the Nepal border to attack the Indian territory, especially attack in Mumbai in 2008 and also in 2012 attack in some of the cities of the India. There are a lot of, in fact, there is reports in the media also, and also the intelligence report, that the Nepalese territory has been used by this terrorists to attack the Indian interests. So India wants to kind of protect, to ensure that their border is kind of secure by both Indian and Nepalese counterpart, and that's why the India is keenly pressurizing Nepalese government to ensure there is a proper kind of border security mechanism in Nepal. And on that reaction, what happens is it's very difficult to protect or install a proper surveillance place in Nepal-India border. So it's difficult for us to also to monitor at the same time. But there are, yes, the threat might escalate further in the future, considering that there are a lot of kind of jihadist activities moving from Afghanistan, Central Asia, and using Nepal as a territory to attack the Indian target. So in the future, we might see more attack from the territory of Nepal to the territory of India.
I mean, that should be a potential threat of India probably moving into Nepal. I mean, if I was a military general sitting in India and saying, "Oh my God, if a tiny country to my northeast is becoming a kind of a jump-off stage," I mean, that would be reason enough for me to send troops.
That is the fear we are kind of saying in the future, because India kind of coercion has increased in terms of like protecting their interests from the open border that Nepal poses, and they have kind of threatened, and we have tend to see like how they have annexed the Sikkim in 1970s, mid 1970s, and how they have controlled the foreign and security policy of Bhutan. We don't say formally, but informally, India do control certain security and foreign policy of Nepal, but we don't want to say it explicitly. There's a treaty that has been signed between Nepal and India in 1953, which basically gives some kind of power to the India to decide on the security issues of Nepal. So basically, if there are certain kind of foreign policy changes that Nepal tries to bring, then there is some kind of resistance from India. So it's more kind of, that treaty provides some kind of leverage for India to dictate what Nepal should do in terms of, for instance, like we are planning to have this joint military drill with China. It's coming this month. So India has kind of formally, informally, through its diplomatic channel, has clearly communicated to Nepal, you can't have a military kind of exercise with China. As an independent sovereign nation, we have a right to do what we want to do, but India is kind of asking us not to continue this exercise with the Chinese military. So this is how we are kind of dealing with the Indian at this moment.
But are there any benefits also to Nepal's long-standing relations with India? I mean, yes, I can see that you feel as if India is bullying Nepal and shipping, but are there any? Is it playing a role in institutions? Is there aid coming from India?
Yeah, of course. India, for like before like 2030, it used to be the biggest foreign direct investor in Nepal in terms of promoting Nepal, like investing in Nepal trade and promoting Nepal trade and agriculture. It is a kind of, being a landlocked country, India provides a lot of transit routes to Nepal for its international trade. So India has been kind of benevolent towards Nepal in terms of dealing with international trade, and also taking a lot of Indian immigrants or migrants into in a lot of kind of areas in India to work. So Indian Nepali citizen can directly work in a lot of the Indian kind of both professional and informal sector. So there is a lot of flexibility on that. So again, the 1950 treaty between India and Nepal provides that kind of flexibility to the citizen of Nepal. But yes, but things are changing, because now this year, like the recent data, so the Chinese has taken India after, like in terms of foreign direct investment. So now Chinese is the biggest investment in Nepal. So slowly Chinese are increasing their aid. So there is aid competition going on between India and China, which was very much witnessed during our earthquake in 2015. So we had a huge earthquake where both India and China competed for kind of providing aid to Nepal. So there was a huge competition between India and China towards providing aid and also gaining the sympathy from the Nepali citizens. Since the historical era, China has been a very kind of good neighbor to Nepal, but its interest has increased since because of especially particularly for the Tibetan refugee, which has remained a concern for the China for since like ages when the Tibet was partly kind of taken over by the Chinese since 1960s. So there are a lot of the refugee coming across the Tibetan autonomous region and to the Nepali territory. So China wants to ensure that the Nepali government kind of kind of ensure that these Tibetan refugees do not cross cross the Chinese border and come to the Nepal. And if they come to the Nepal, then they hand over those Tibetan refugees back to the China. So Nepal is facing this dual scenario, like whether if returning the Tibetan refugee back to the Chinese government will have an impact on Nepal human rights commitment. That is one aspect. If we do not return them, then we have to face the Chinese wrath. Like this is the dilemma that we are facing. But now Chinese interest has increased in Nepal beyond Tibetan refugee as well because of the rise of India, and also they want to promote their One Belt One Road initiatives, so through which they want to build a more kind of road and rail network. Especially they want to use the Nepal territory, especially the southern border, to develop a rail link from Tibet autonomous region to the certain part of Nepal, mountainous part of Nepal, and linking it to the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So bringing a more kind of border area, and from Pakistan they want to go back to the Middle East and to the Greece. So there's a huge kind of rail network that has been under planning. Well, if Nepali government is positive towards that, then they will start from like Tibet to Nepal. If Nepal government do not kind of give a positive indication, then they might start from the Pakistan occupied Kashmir region, which they have already invested a lot of amount of money, the Chinese. So that is their ideal scenario. They want to connect Nepal also, and also their interest is to connect some part of the Indian region, like especially the northernest part of the Indian region, if Indian government shows positiveness. So there is kind of negotiation between India and China, and also between Nepal and China, being a part of this One Belt One Road initiative of the Chinese
I
government.
understand that in the United States also has an international refugee quota commitment to taking in a certain amount of refugees, and the U.S. has been trying to fulfill that quota by taking lots of refugees from Nepal and Tibet, rather than taking them, say, from Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
So what is going on there with the U.S.? Is it clashing with this China's insistence that refugees be returned to Tibet?
Yeah, US has been pressurizing for the past 20-25 years to the Nepali government that they fulfill the international human rights commitment, that is to protect the rights of Tibetan refugees once they enter to the Nepalese government. So there is an informal agreement between United States, Nepali government, and also the United Nations High Commission for Refugee. So whenever refugee come across the Tibetan refugee come across the Nepal territory, we hand them to the UNHCR office there, so where they will document them, register them, and they will send it them to the Dalai Lama at in the Dharmasala at India. So that's how the mechanism has been working now. And but since there are kind of information that these kind of Tibetan refugees have started kind of actively kind of participating political activity in Nepali territory, at times we have handed, like at least in 2005 we have handed 20 or 25 Tibetan refugees to the Chinese. So at that time the United States stopped aid to the Nepali government. So say because they punish Nepal for not obeying the gentleman agreement that we had with the United States. So time and again United States pressurized the Nepali government to follow the commitment, and we have been adhering to that.
How big is the flow of refugees from there?
Initially, it used to be in thousands in the number, but since now since 3 to 5 years now there is kind of increased border surveillance from the Nepali government side. So we have and also from the Chinese government side from their part of. So the number has decreased dramatically. It has cut down to lowest level. I think the US is particularly interested to contain the China in terms of like their overall strategy in Asia Pacific region also, and with growing partnership with India, they want to contain the China, and they want to use the Nepali territory also through its democratic kind of Nepal democratic institution, and also the human rights issues, that they ensure the Nepal government or Nepal falls in the side of United States in terms of containing the China. That's what their grand strategy seems like that, and Nepali government is having a kind of to maintain a delicate balance, and at the same time they do not want to kind of abide completely with the Chinese, but also they do not want to abide completely with the United States. So it is facing difficult dilemma. But so far we have been managing it in terms of being committed towards the human rights commitment of Tibetan refugee, but at the same time we're also managing our relationship with China.
You've been traveling in the U.S. now for 5 weeks. You're part of the SUSI program, the study of U.S. institutes, national security and foreign policy. So what are your impressions? This is your first trip to the US?
Yeah, this is my first trip, and I think I got to see more closely like how the United States foreign policy making and how it influenced, like how the media plays the role as well, and also with talking to the general American citizen, I got to know a lot of things about how the United States thinks globally, like how they thinks about global level, and also the internal level, how the United States thinks about internal level. But I do not know how the foreign policy will come under the Donald Trump, so President Donald Trump. But there is a like as I observed being within the 4 to 5 year 5 weeks here in the United States, there is general fear within the American citizen how the United States will kind of go ahead and under the Donald Trump presidency. So who knows what will happen to the world? But it is difficult things to predict how the things will
Well,
happen in
one
the
of
future.
the reasons why we study the national security institutions is in order to understand that the US is a highly institutionalized country, and policies and politics are also very streamlined and institutionalized, and these institutions have been very enduring. So while individual politicians do bring in slight variations, I think there is much more continuity in US policies than people realize. But it was a pleasure talking to you, Professor Rohit Karki,
Thank
and
you.
I wish
Thanks
you all
for
the
it.
best.
Thank you.